In the world of men who make other men disappear, loyalty is never given. It is purchased, tested, and eventually, always betrayed. Vera Dunning knew none of that when she clocked in at 7:15 on a Tuesday night, tied her apron behind her back, and tucked a spare pen into her hair because she always lost the first one. She had worked the late shift at Hargrove and Clyde for 11 months. Not the restaurant part, the hotel part. The kind of hotel that didn't put its prices on the website, the kind where the lobby smelled like cedar and old money, and something Vera could never quite name. She was a floor attendant on the private dining level, the 41st floor, the one that didn't appear on the elevator directory unless you had a key card in a specific shade of matte black. Her job was simple: maintain the linens, refill the water stations, keep the side tables clean, and stay invisible. She was very good at staying invisible. Vera was 26 years old and had been invisible most of her life. Not the kind of invisible that makes you mysterious, the other kind. The kind that happens when you are a large woman in a world that decides women like you don't take up space worth noticing. She was 5'4" and 260 pounds, and she had long since made peace with the fact that she would walk into a room and people would look through her the way you look through a window when there's something more interesting outside. It was fine. Usually it was fine. That night, it was useful. The private dining suite on 41 had been reserved under a corporate name she didn't recognize, Aldano Collective, LLC, which meant nothing to her. Corporate reservations were common. Lawyers, hedge fund managers, the occasional senator whose staff always over-tipped and under-thanked. She had restocked the bar cart at 6:45 and checked the linen twice and confirmed with Chef that the amuse-bouche was going out at 8 sharp. Everything was in order. She retreated to the service corridor and waited the way she always waited, patient and quiet, like furniture that had learned to breathe. The men arrived at 7:50. There were 6 of them. She saw them through the small square window in the service door, the kind of window designed so staff could check timing without being seen. She watched them settle into the room the way men settle when they own every room they walk into. Unhurried, certain. The kind of certainty that has nothing to do with confidence and everything to do with consequence. The one at the head of the table was different from the others. She noticed him the way you notice a bruise, not because you're looking for it, but because something in you registers a disruption in the ordinary. He was older than the rest, early 40s maybe, dark hair, silver at the temples, the kind of face that had been handsome for so long it had grown into something harder and more interesting than handsome. He sat at the head of the table without anyone directing him there. No one had to. He wore a charcoal suit with no tie, and he rested one hand flat on the white linen, like a man who was as never not calculating something. Later, when she knew his name, she would understand why the room had felt different with him in it. His name was Cormac Vere, and he ran the most powerful organized crime operation between Chicago and the Eastern Seaboard. And no one in law enforcement had ever gotten anything to stick to him. And he was 43 years old, and he was sitting 12 feet away from Vera Dunning while she checked that the water carafes were full. She didn't know any of that yet. What she knew was that the man second to his left was lying. She had learned to read people the way some people learn a second language, out of necessity, with no formal instruction, through pure accumulated observation. 11 months on a floor where she was expected to be silent gave her a lot of time to watch, and she had watched men like these before, not exactly like these, but close enough. Men who said one thing and meant another. Men whose hands told a different story than their mouths. The man second to his left had introduced himself to the table as Whitmore. She hadn't caught a first name. He was in his 50s, pink-faced, with the soft look of someone who had once been athletic and had spent 20 years undoing it. His laugh was slightly too fast. His eye contact with the man at the head was slightly too steady. The kind of steady you practice, not the kind that comes naturally. And his hands were the thing. He kept his right hand below the table. Not in his lap, the way people do when they're cold or nervous. Below the table, near the edge, near the leg of his chair, like he was holding on to something. Vera had served 100 dinners. She had watched hands her entire life. Something about those hands made her chest go tight. She told herself it was nothing. She was a floor attendant in a hotel on a Tuesday night. She went back to the service corridor and sorted the clean napkins and waited for the signal from chef. But she kept thinking about his hands. At 8:15, she was called in to refresh the bread service. She moved through the room the way she always did, efficient and unobtrusive, making herself as close to furniture as a person could get. She replaced the bread basket on the far left, worked her way down, murmured apologies when she reached across, kept her eyes low. She was 2 seats away from Whitmore when she saw it. Not clearly, not all at once, just enough. He had shifted his body to reach for his wine glass, and in shifting, he had created a gap between his arm and his side, and through that gap she saw the small glass vial in his right hand, barely the size of his thumb, clear, sealed with a dark rubber stopper. She kept walking. She set down the bread basket at the next place setting. She poured water into the glass directly to the right of the man at the head of the table, Cormac Vere, though she still didn't know that name, and her hands were steady, and her face was blank, and her heart was going absolutely insane inside her chest. She had no idea what was in the vial. She had every idea what was in the vial. She went back to the service corridor. She stood very still for a moment, her back against the wall, the empty bread tray in her hands. There was a man in that room holding a small glass vial, and he was sitting 2 seats from the man at the head of the table, and the man at the head of the table had just been served a drink. One drink, one glass, poured personally by the sommelier who had left the room immediately after. She looked at the door. She looked at the floor. She thought about her rent, which was 4 days late. She thought about her mother in Dayton, who called every Sunday. She thought about the fact that she had no way of knowing for certain what was in that vial, and no way to prove it, and no reason to believe anyone would take the word of a floor attendant with a pen tucked in her hair over a man in a suit worth more than she made in 3 months. She thought about the look on that man's face when he sat down. The man at the head of the table. The way he had placed his hand flat on the linen. The way he was alive right now, and she was the only person in the world who might know that was about to change. She picked up a fresh water carafe. She walked back through the door. The room had shifted slightly in the 3 minutes she'd been gone. A different conversation was going. Whitmore had leaned back in his chair, more relaxed than before. His right hand was back on the table. She didn't look at it. She kept her trajectory natural. The far side first, then working back. She had done this route so many times she could do it with her eyes closed, which meant she could do it while her mind was doing something else entirely. What it was doing was this, calculating angles. Cormac Vere's glass was on the right side of his place setting. The table was set formally. She was working the left side of the table, which meant she had a natural reason to move to the right side to clear what was there. A small empty aperitif glass that had been placed before dinner, the kind of thing you clear without being asked. Standard, invisible work. She cleared the aperitif glass from his left, and in the same motion, the same single fluid motion that she had practiced without knowing she was practicing it, through 11 months of fine dining service, she set down the water carafe, moved the full whiskey glass precisely 2 inches to the left, and replaced it with the fresh pour she had staged on her tray before walking in. The old glass went onto her tray. Cormac Vere did not look up from the man he was speaking to. Vera finished the water circuit and walked back through the service door and set the tray down on the counter and stood there looking at the glass with the whiskey still in it, completely untouched, with no way to know what was in it or if she had just done something very stupid or something very necessary. Her hands were shaking. She hadn't noticed until just now. What happened in the next 40 minutes, she only understood in pieces later. She heard voices. Not arguing, something more controlled than arguing, and more frightening because of it. She heard a single sharp sound she couldn't identify. She heard a chair scrape. She heard a door open and close twice. Then one of the private security men knocked on the service corridor door. She hadn't even known they were in the building, and told her very politely, very firmly, that she needed to come with him. She thought, this is it. This is when I lose my job and possibly everything else. She walked out of the service corridor with her spine straight and her face arranged into something she hoped looked like calm. The room had changed. 3 of the 6 men were gone. One of the remaining men, not Whitmore, Whitmore was gone too, was standing near the window with his phone out. Another was speaking quietly into an earpiece. Cormac Vere was standing at the head of the table. He was looking directly at her. She had assumed when she imagined this moment during the 40 minutes she'd been waiting, that he would look angry or cold, or the way powerful men sometimes look when they're about to make a problem go away. He didn't look like any of those things. He looked, and she would struggle to find a better word for a long time afterward, interested. "You changed my drink," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," she said. "When did you see him?" She blinked. "The bread service, 8:15. He held her gaze for a long moment. In her peripheral vision, the man with the earpiece had gone still. "And you didn't say anything," Cormac said. "You didn't call for security. You didn't alert management. You just changed the glass." "I didn't think there was time," she said. And then, because it was also true, and I didn't think anyone would believe me. Something shifted in his face. It was small, she almost missed it. "What's your name?" he said. "Vera. Vera Dunning. How long have you worked here, Vera Dunning?" 11 months. He turned away from her then, toward the man by the window, and said something she couldn't hear. The man nodded and left the room. The security guard who had brought her in had also, at some point, stepped back to the doorway. She was almost alone with him. She thought about leaving. She thought about saying she needed to get back to work. She thought about the glass sitting on the counter in the service corridor, and whether she should have thrown it away, or kept it, and what exactly the right protocol was. When you suspected you had just intercepted a murder attempt at a private dinner on the 41st floor of a hotel where you weren't supposed to exist. "You're not afraid," he said. She looked at him. "I'm very afraid. You don't look it." "I learned a long time ago," she said, "that looking afraid doesn't help." He was quiet, the kind of quiet that has weight. The kind that you don't fill because you understand instinctively that the person generating it is thinking something important, and you don't interrupt important thinking. Finally, he said, "The man you saw. He was going to use that to kill me, frame one of my associates for it, and hand everything I've built over to people I don't deal with. That was the plan. He had been building it for 7 months. A pause. 7 months, and my own security didn't see it. She didn't say anything. You saw it in 45 seconds. I watch hands," she said. It came out quieter than she intended. He looked at her for a long time. "Go home, Vera Dunning," he finally said. "You'll be contacted tomorrow with information about a position I think you're better suited for than this one. Take the night to think about it. You're not obligated to accept." She opened her mouth. She closed it again. "The glass," she said finally. "We have it." She nodded. She untied her apron. She walked to the elevator with her spine still straight and her hands finally not shaking. She didn't sleep that night. She lay in her apartment in Pilsen on the full-size mattress she'd had since college and stared at the ceiling and thought about what it means to make a decision in 3 seconds that you'll be unpacking for the rest of your life. She had seen the vial, and she had done the math, and she had walked back through that door. She didn't know why exactly. She told herself it was because she didn't have time to think, but that wasn't completely true. She'd had 3 minutes in the service corridor. She'd had time, what she had not been able to do, and she examined this carefully in the dark of her bedroom. The way you examine a cut to see how deep it goes was walk away and let it happen. She didn't know that man. She didn't know his name or his business, or any of the 1,000 things she now knew about him. She just knew that he was alive, and she was the only person in a position to keep him that way. She thought about that for a long time. Sometime around 3 in the morning, she thought, I would do it again. The contact came at 10 the next morning. A woman named only Reyes, who spoke in the brisk, pleasant tone of someone who managed complicated things efficiently and without drama. She explained, without explaining very much, that there was a position available in private household management for an individual whose household had specific, non-standard needs. The compensation was, and here she named a number that made Vera sit down on the edge of her mattress and stay there for a full minute. The address she was given was a brownstone on the north side. She looked it up. There was nothing to find. She thought about her 11 months on the 41st floor. She thought about what invisible gets you and what it costs you, and whether she was tired of being furniture. She thought about the way he had looked at her. Not through her, at her. She called Reyes back at 11:45 and said yes. The brownstone was exactly what it looked like from the outside. Old money, maintained with the kind of quiet precision that costs more than renovation. She was let in by a man named Breslin. She found out later that was his last name. He never offered a first, who showed her around with the efficiency of someone who had explained the same things many times to many people and had long since stopped caring about their reactions. The kitchen, the household calendar system, the protocols for deliveries and visitors, the rooms she had access to and the rooms she did not. She listened. She asked 3 questions. He looked at her with something approximating approval. She started the following Monday. Cormac Vere ran his household the way she imagined he ran everything else. Quietly, completely, with a structure so precise that most people in it didn't see the structure at all. It just felt like order. It felt like things going correctly. She was responsible for coordinating the domestic staff, managing the calendar, liaising with the kitchen, handling correspondence that didn't require his personal attention. It was not glamorous work. It was organizational work. It was work that required someone who could hold 12 things in their head at once and stay calm when the 13th thing arrived without warning. She was, it turned out, very good at it. She saw him rarely at first. He was not in the house the way that men who own houses are sometimes in houses, present, proprietary, tracking the staff with a vague territorial awareness. He was there when he needed to be there and absent when he didn't. And when he walked through a room, he walked through it without seeming to require anything from it. He noticed her work, though. She understood this gradually, through small evidence. Adjustments made to the household calendar that reflected changes she had suggested. A note left in the kitchen, not addressed to her, but she was the only person who would understand it. That said only, the Thursday arrangement works better. She had moved his standing Thursday call to accommodate a schedule conflict she'd noticed, on her own initiative, without being asked. She had not been sure he would even register the change. He had registered the change. She began to understand that he registered most things. It was 6 weeks into the position when she had her first real conversation with him. He found her at the desk in the household office at 7 in the morning. Which was not an unusual time for her to be there. She arrived early, the same way she had always arrived early, because arriving early was the simplest possible way to be prepared. She had a coffee and a spreadsheet, and she was cross-referencing 2 calendars, and she did not hear him come in. "You rerouted the Halstead delivery," he said. She looked up. He was standing in the doorway in a dark shirt, no jacket, looking slightly less like a verdict than he usually did at other hours. The original driver had a flag on him, she said. Nothing definitive, but enough. I switched to the secondary vendor. Who flagged it? I did. I ran the background cross-check myself. She paused. That's within my scope. I checked, a slight shift in his expression. Yes, he said. It is. He came into the office then, which he had not done before, and he sat in the chair across from the desk, which was technically her chair, the household manager's chair, and he looked at her across the desk with the same quality of attention he had given her on the 41st floor. How did you know to cross-check the driver? He said. The delivery was rescheduled twice in 10 days, she said. Rescheduling happens. Twice in 10 days on a standing order suggests either disorganization or adjustment. I wanted to know which, and you decided it was worth flagging based on that. I decided it was worth looking into based on that. What I found was worth flagging. He was quiet for a moment. Outside, the neighborhood was coming awake. She could hear it, faintly, the particular sound of a city morning that you only hear when you've been up long enough. What did you want to be? He said. Before this. She blinked at the shift. I'm sorry. Before floor attendant. Before this. What did you want? She looked at her spreadsheet for a moment, then back at him. I wanted to go to law school, she said. I had a partial scholarship. Deferred twice for family reasons. The deferral expired. A pause. That's not a complaint. It's just what happened. What kind of law? Criminal, she said. And she was aware of the particular quality of the silence that followed that. And she met his eyes steadily and didn't look away. Yes, I know. Something crossed his face that might, on another person, have been humor. All right, he said. He stood. He was almost to the door when he said, without turning, You can call me Cormac. Most people in this house don't bother. She said nothing, because she didn't know yet what the right response to that was. She found out over time. The attempt on his life had not been the end of anything. She understood this gradually, the way you understand weather, by accumulation, by pattern, by learning to read what's coming before it arrives. The man with the vial, whose name was Whitmore, which she already knew, and whose full name was Gerald Whitmore, which she learned later, had been a lieutenant in a loosely affiliated network that wanted what Cormac had built and did not want to purchase it or compete with it or negotiate for it. They wanted to take it. Whitmore was in federal custody. The case against him was, by all accounts, significant, but the network he represented was not Whitmore. It was the thing behind Whitmore, and the thing behind Whitmore was still operating. She knew all of this in outline only for a long time. What she knew in detail was the household, the schedules, the patterns, the small inconsistencies that required attention. And she was starting to see inconsistencies that weren't in the household. It started with a name. She was cross-referencing vendor accounts 3 months into the position. Routine reconciliation. The kind of thing that produces nothing interesting 99 times out of 100, when she saw a name appear twice that she had not seen before. Not in any of the approved vendor lists, not flagged anywhere, just a name attached to a payment record that had been processed 4 months ago, 1 month before Whitmore. The name was Pendleton Group. She spent 3 days verifying that she was not misreading something, that she hadn't missed a step in her own process, that there was a legitimate reason for the name to be there. There wasn't. She went through everything she could access in the household records. She found 2 more instances. Different line items, different months, same name. No corresponding documentation, no approval trail, no authorized signatory she could locate. She stayed at her desk until 11, on a Thursday night, the office empty and quiet around her, the city doing what the city does outside the window, and she thought about what this meant and what she was going to do about it. She thought about law school, about the scholarship that had expired, about the 11 months on the 41st floor, and the pen in her hair, and the decision she had made in 3 seconds with her back against a wall. She thought about the glass on the tray, untouched. She printed 3 copies of everything she had found, placed one in a sealed envelope in the household filing system, kept one, and carried the 3rd upstairs. He was in the study, which she had been in twice. She knocked. He said, "Come in." She put the documents on the desk. She said, "Someone inside this structure has been running payments to an unauthorized entity for at least 7 months. I can show you the trail if you want to see it. I can also show you where it goes, but I'd need access to records that are currently above my clearance level to be certain. I didn't want to go looking without telling you first." He looked at the papers. He looked at her. "How long have you been working on this?" he said. 3 days of verification. I noticed the first anomaly about a week ago. Why didn't you come to me when you first noticed it?" "Because I wasn't certain," she said. "I didn't want to bring you something I couldn't stand behind." He was quiet for a long moment. "Sit down, Vera." She sat. He reviewed the documents with the kind of attention she had come to understand was characteristic of him. Unhurried, complete, the kind of reading that leaves nothing unexamined. He asked 3 questions. She answered them. He asked a 4th that she hadn't anticipated, and she said she didn't know, but she could find out, and he nodded. Then he said, "The Pendleton Group is a shell. It was set up 8 months ago. I know who's behind it." She waited. "One of the men I trust most in this organization," he said. She said nothing, because there was nothing useful to say. She had brought him the information. What he did with it was not her decision. "You could have buried this," he said. "You could have decided it wasn't your problem. You could have decided the risk wasn't worth it." "Yes," she said. "Why didn't you?" She thought about it honestly. "Because it's someone in this house," she said finally. "That makes it my problem." He looked at her for a long moment. "I need someone who can hold this information and not move on it until I tell them to," he said. "Who can continue their work without changing anything that would signal what they know." "Can you do that?" "Yes," she said. "It might be several weeks." "All right. If this goes the way I expect it to go," he said, "there will be a conversation I'll need you in the room for. Not as staff, as a witness. Are you prepared for what that means?" She understood what it meant. She thought about it honestly. She said, "Yes." He nodded once. He looked at the papers again. "Thank you, Vera," he said. It came out differently than she expected. Not the dismissal of a superior, not the management tone of a man thanking competent staff. Something else. Something that she filed away carefully and did not examine too closely. Not yet. She stood. She walked to the door. "Vera." She turned. "The scholarship," he said. "The one that expired." She looked at him. "There are people I know who could make a call." She was quiet for a moment. "I'll let you know," she said, "if I want that." He almost smiled. "Fair enough," he said. It took 4 weeks. She did not change her routine. She filed things and coordinated calendars and managed the kitchen schedule and ran the cross-checks and acted, in every observable way, exactly as she had acted before. She got quite good at carrying a secret with no particular expression. The man behind the Pendleton Group was named Aldrich. She finally learned his full name during the week before it ended, and he had been one of Cormac's longest associates, which was exactly the reason he'd been able to do it as long as he had, and exactly the reason it would cost what it cost. She was in the room when it happened. Not the whole of it. There were parts of that evening she was not present for, and did not ask about. But she was there for the beginning, and she was there for the accounting. And she watched Cormac Vere sit across from a man he had known for 20 years and ask him to explain himself. And she watched the man try, and she watched Cormac listen with the patience of someone who is not listening for the truth, but for the particular shape of the lie. Afterward, when the room had emptied, he sat at the table with his hand flat on the linen again. She would always remember the hand on the linen, and he was quiet for a long time. She stayed because something in her understood that this was one of the moments you stay for, even when you don't know what you're supposed to do. Finally, he said, "How are you doing?" It startled her. "I'm all right," she said. "You've never been in a room like that before." "No," she said, "I haven't." "How are you actually doing?" She thought about it. "I think I'm processing," she said. He almost laughed. Not quite, but almost. "That's the right answer," he said. She stayed. That is the part of this story that people, when she tells it, always seem to expect to be more complicated. They expect a moment of doubt, or a moment of revelation, or a turning point that she can locate precisely. There isn't one. There's just the accumulation of ordinary days, the work she was good at, the household that ran correctly under her hands, and the man at the head of every room she walked into who had looked at her. From the first moment, from the 41st floor, like she was someone worth seeing. He was not easy. She learned that. He was demanding and private, and had a particular way of being disappointed in things that could empty a room from 20 feet. He did not explain himself often, and did not apologize readily, and had spent enough years being the most dangerous person in any situation that he had forgotten, sometimes that other people had not. But he paid attention to everything she did, to everything she said, to the moments between the words, the things she didn't say, the decisions she made on her own, and the ones she brought to him, and the specific, observable quality of her judgment. He paid attention in a way that no one had ever paid attention to Vera Dunning in her life. She thought about that for a long time. She was still thinking about it when, 8 months after the 41st floor, he asked her to stay after a meeting, and when the room was empty, he told her, plainly without theatre, that he did not know exactly what this was, but he was finding it difficult to imagine the household, or the operation, or most of the hours of his day without her in it. She said, "That's not very romantic, Cormac." He looked mildly offended. "I'm not a romantic." "I know," she said. "I'm saying it anyway." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Would it help if I told you that I've been thinking about you since the bread service?" "Since the bread service," she repeated. "You picked up the aperitif glass with your left hand to clear the trajectory. I noticed." She stared at him. "That," he said, "is the most precise thing I have ever seen done by someone who was also terrified." She felt something she did not have an immediate name for. Something that started in her chest and spread slowly outward, warm and unfamiliar and not at all unwelcome. "I was very terrified," she said. "I know," he said. "You did it anyway." She looked at him across the table. She thought about the 41st floor, and the service corridor, and the pen in her hair, and the glass on the tray, and all the invisible years before and after, and she thought about what it meant to be seen by someone who saw things for a living. "All right," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "All right, to whatever this is," she said. "All right." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded, the small, complete nod of a man who has decided something and intends to hold to it. "Good," he said. The city moved outside the window. The house held its breath. And Vera Dunning, who had spent 11 months being invisible on the 41st floor, and another 8 months in a brownstone learning what it means to be known, sat across from the most dangerous man she had ever met and thought, "I would do it again. Every single time."